Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Bushwhacking History in Buffalo with Berserker Bear and another special guest. Robbie Rad Bear is back. Good to see you, bro. How are you?
Good.
So, where were we at, man? Last year, you said we were going to go to, well, one of the many spots that you said that we should go to is this Neuter fort that we were just at our showcasing of it the last episode, right? That was a good time. I appreciate everybody for showing up for that one. But you had
Yeah.
made mention that we go there about a year ago, and we finally went there. It was a beautiful day, and I gotta say, man, from Lockport to going to the Forest Lawn Cemetery to that one Mount Albion,
Yeah, Mount
every time we hit the bricks, Robbie, we crush it. So this Neuter Fort is very significant because it lassos in the native history, and that's like your neck of the woods, pun intended. And so, man, with that, maybe just give a brief introduction of, obviously we're going to go off of the outline that you made. You've been putting in the work for it, so I appreciate that. But we're going to detail a little bit more in depth of the Neuter tribe itself, how it relates to the greater confederation of the Iroquois, who they were in sync with, the Wenro. And Robbie knows all about that, not just native stuff like the idiosyncrasies of what I just described, but the flora as well. And when we've been out on hikes, he'll just pick something up and say, "Look at this. This is what the natives used to use for yada yada." And that's been showcased in previous episodes. So, Robbie, thank you for always hitting it out of the firmament with places to go. And not only do we have so much work and research to do on this one, the Neuter Fort and the neutral nations and the how that incorporates the Wenro, who were around my area and held in Niagara. We're going to talk about all that stuff, folks. So, Robbie, what was your take on this? Also, we got a comment underneath that video that says a gentleman that had bushwhacked that site before didn't think that we were on top of it. So, what are your thoughts about all that, bro? Welcome back, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. And yeah, it's great to be here again. Always a pleasure. And it's always something that's fascinated me is the local Native American culture and history ever since I was a kid. But in recent years, really started to like kind of touch back to it and really deep dive into it with all of my other, rabbit holes or gravy holes, if you will, that I found these days. I kind of curtailed back to some of my old love for history in the last like 4 or 5 years. And in the last 2 years, I've been trying to locate the spot that we went to, the Shelby Center spot there, the Neuter Fort. And yeah, it was a long, like, search. I mean, I thought it was gone initially because, of a reading I found in, a book, essentially an old book that was actually one of the first books, commissioned by the Smithsonian to be written, possibly before they were completely usurping history. Maybe it was, meant to do good at this point. It wasn't totally corrupted and kind of controlled from the inside and actually covering history up like it's known to do in
Oh, how
later
dare
decades.
you? How dare you? How dare you, sir?
But anyways, not to go off on tangents, but I thought it was completely already gone with the quarry that we found there, and I kind of given up on it. Like, another one that they've completely terraformed and just pushed away, and we'll never find it unless we find lidar data or whatever. Um, and then I was looking at some old topography maps, and I actually noticed it delineated. It actually gave a thing for it and noted it as a neuter fort, and that's the first time I had noticed any sort of relation to a specific peoples given to it, because the original book by E.G. Squire, Aboriginal Monuments, doesn't allude to where, or not, does not allude to who. Um, so it was cool to see that. And then where it also delineated it was just to the southwest of the quarry, which is like, whoa, maybe it's still there. Like it's not fully, there's a possibility it's not gone. Um, so then got re-excited on the search, and then that was when about a year ago when I talked to you first about it. So that it reignited my search, and I was really excited, like, hey, maybe it's not gone, and we can find something that's been kind of lost to the historical record, as far as I knew at that point. So yeah, so after another year of searching, kind of pinpointed it and said, weather's breaking, it's nice enough. Let's get out there and try to find it.
What a great day it was for it too, Robbie. Can you that it and then it got cold after that. And I'll tell
It's interesting, very interesting. With one day out of like 2-3 weeks, maybe.
seriously, like I mentioned, that gentleman that had been there before. Now he had, you probably see it on the screen or whatever, but he had been there before I even started my videos on my YouTube channel a couple of years ago. So that's kind of a weird sync retro. But you just said we were on when we found it, and that was a cool instance because I would, like you said, I thought I was looking more towards the actual quarry. I thought they quarried it, right? Now I wanted to show.
And that was my thoughts for quite some time after I was
Yeah,
first to it, because the article or the book chapter for Orleans County and Aboriginal monuments only cites one earthwork or site for Orleans County, New York, and it's this one here.
boom.
And the only like kind of key it gives you, because a lot of them have detailed like survey maps that allow you to triangulate its location much easier. This one didn't have any. It was pretty much already lost and forgotten. And at that point, the only thing it says is it's about 1.5 miles, I think it is, west of Shelby Center, New York. So if you pull a line on Google Earth from Shelby Center, New York, from the actual four corners of Shelby Center west, it's right into a rock quarry. It's
And
Shelby
that's where
Crush.
your attention gets focused. Your little treasure map, though, bro. When you first cited this, you had this map that we see here, an approximate site.
Where did this one come from?
I'm
I
not
can't
sure. I
remember.
thought I've had this for a minute. I think you shared this with me from a while ago, bro.
Maybe I did.
Yeah, like when you first said it to me, I've had this. I think you sent this over.
Mhm.
People will see it more, but so that dude said, I'm going to read this guy's comment right quick so we can get some context and we'll build off of that. So when people have it in their mind's eye, this is the type of fort that we're talking about. This isn't the actual Neuter fort itself, but like these round forts with the palisaded wood. So that's in your mind's eye. I should have showed that last episode, but this is the data dump. So it is what it is. Now picture that. And when we say double palisaded, just as it shows in this picture,
Right.
there was two.
Yeah, you can see it around the
You can
outer perimeter.
see it. That's what delineates this one. Also, it's interesting that it's delineated as an earthwork, bro. And that's where it brings into where you
Right.
pointed out that it's a wheel. You want to ladle on that a bit of the wheel here, and then I'll read that guy's comment. So we'll do a little bit of a teaser here.
Yeah.
You
So
had suspected it looks like a what, Robbie?
yeah, I had suspected right after looking at it, I'm like, why does this look so familiar to me? Like, what am I looking at here? And then it like dawned on me, and I'm like, these would you even see that it would have had maybe palisades of some sort or some sort of maybe rock walls or something that almost broke it into quadrants as well. And you see it broke into quadrants on the map, part of its wooded area and part of its cultivated field. So they would have been like maybe living in like a longhouse in one of the wooded areas while growing useful things and cultivating these fields. It's just very interesting. And like you're saying, it looks like a solar wheel the way it's broken into quadrants.
Boom.
Sun wheel or a sun cross. It goes by a lot of different names. and this symbol's been found on every continent: geoglyphs, petroglyphs, stone, rock wall paintings and carvings and different
Celtic
things.
cross.
Every continent, literally, I think, except Antarctica, but I think, some probably that too.
This kid
Uh,
drops the Antarctica reference. Nice
you
one.
know what I mean? So
When
I'm
you
sure
said that, Robbie, and you
sure
pointed
Admiral,
out the wheel thing, that kind of blew my mind because then that last was in the Celtic thing and
right. And one of the
Celtic
facts
connection.
with that is it's literally also not only found on every continent, but also one of the oldest, most like universal symbols uh across the world.
Yeah, and it's kind of you could even last loop in the sky wheel, sky clock type notion, where another branch off of this would be the swastika, the old symbol of
Right,
the North, the Ursa Major around North Pole. So
right.
there's a more gravitas to this than meets the eye, one might say, right? So
Hmm.
that's going to be some gravy that we can unpack a little bit more. But yeah, that's and again, does it have to do with was there connection with the natives prior to the Columbian exchange? Is kind of the undertone of what we're getting at here. Did the Vikings have to do with it? Obviously, we know that the Dutch do, but I suspect that the Dutch were following old Viking trade routes. But I'll digress on that. And I want to get your thoughts on this, and we'll use the lidar against the obviously our field work. So this is a cool case in which you pointed out a target. In this case, it was the Neuter fort. Okay, we went there eventually. We did our field work, got assessment on the ground, came back and confirmed that we were in the right spot. Now, my attention was diverted to the quarry, bro. For real, I was like, oh, they probably just got rid of it. You had the notion that we were probably on it already, as I get the sense when we were going back through the our pictures and stuff. And obviously, your awesome reading. That was dope, dude. Oh man, that was awesome. Plus the setting too, and you could hear the water in the background. So cool. But this gentleman takes not reserve. I don't mean to use that word, right? He says, well, let me just read it and then we'll unpack from there. Hey guys, you were so close. The fort was to the south of where you stood by the quarry, back in the woods, down the trail, and through the swamp, over both trenches dug for the palisades, both only a foot deep or so. The burial mound is still there and well above ground. It is very big. You have to bushwhack to get it. I love that. You can send I can send you the exact GPS info if you like. The land is peaceful and beautiful there. It is. I got that sense also.
Hmm.
We got that sense. We said it. But it does
Yeah,
have a sense of unsettlement to me. Okay, so he picked on something different. So much happened on that land and so much blood spilled. Such a sad story, and even more so that it is lost to time and forgotten. Well, I would say it's not lost to time because we're bringing that back out. But shout out to Ron, Just Digging Life. That's his channel. He was out bushwhacking this place before I had even before I even met you, Robbie. I think actually. So go figure. Put that into retro sync status, right?
and
I would say I disagree. I think how we assessed it, and then again we layered it with the lidar, and it looks like the round fort on Google. What do you say to that, Robbie? And
yeah,
you know what? Should I read your?
yeah. I respectfully disagreed with him in there. I mean, I could sum it up,
I'll show it on screen also.
read it if they're that inquisitive, but essentially, I just respectfully disagreed. We know what trenches and ditches he's referring to south of it in the swamp, more so area. The one little treasure map thing that you showed, it's delineated as the marsh below the site, the approximate site. And uh, if you go back to the reading from uh, E.G. Squire's book, Aboriginal Monuments, it not only says that it's nearly circular, but 3 acres of ground. So it gives us specific dimensions and shape of it. And if you look at those trenches, especially if you pull up like a contour map,
That's it, dude.
trenches are linear and straight. They're not perfectly east to west, but you can see them, and they're relatively like come from the northeast and head to the southwest, and they're not circular in form. So to me, they could be some sort of outer work that was done by these people. And they could have been outer defensive works. They may have been palisaded. I could see that, but I don't think that that's the site itself. I believe it's a more of an outer work.
I think
Personally,
that so what I have on screen right now is the LiDAR, and I'm going back and forth between the LiDAR and the Google, and it's the same. It's over the
okay.
same area. I literally believe I'm obviously that's the fort. We were on the fort right where we assessed it, right where you judged the entrance point to be when you were detailing the probably would be chilling here.
That
Check
was
in
wild.
your that was
Yeah,
that's right because that links up with
the blue
the
map
the blue map. Yeah.
down
So
there.
I would say, Rob, I appreciate the insight and the feedback, brother, and much love and a shout out to you. And keep getting out there in the field, right? But I'm saying that we were on top of that thing.
Yeah, I think we were in the southeast quadrant. I believe it would be. Yeah, southeast
South,
quadrant.
I agree. Yep, right along, skirted right along the quarry edge.
Hmm.
Now this incorporates the bigger aspect of what's going on here with the tribes, and we're at the Neuter Fort. The greater thing here is the European influence in the Beaver Wars and the Iroquois Confederation that initially was trying to curtail that and maybe became an arm of it, but also how does the neutral nation play into this? How does the Wenro play in this? And what made me think about when you were talking about crop rotation is obviously the greater Iroquois language and how important that is in this area and the crop rotations and the important aspect of the three sisters, the squash, the beans, and corn. We learned about that. We talked about this before, bro. Like we learned about this briefly. This is all this whole history here with how the natives dealt with the encroachment of the European influence, as we put it, is so fascinating to me that in retrospect, I wonder why we didn't learn more about it in elementary school. We did.
Right.
I remember briefly learning about the corn and the cornucopia, Quakers and stuff, but nothing to the extent that I've obviously delved into the past 2 weeks. But I think that we do our youth a disservice not being more in depth with this history earlier on in elementary. Like the sacred three sisters, that was
Mm.
very important here in this area, and yet it's hardly ever talked about. And
We're
it's almost like a joke that the Indians are on reservations, and it's
and the fact that their main like things that they're known for and their main like income generations have been limited to cigarettes, which tobacco is one of their most sacred plants, and smoking it was one of the more derogatory ways to use it. There was much more sacred, much more respected ways to use it ceremonially. So smoking it is one of the like lesser ways to use such a sacred plant. So for them to be just known for like cigarettes and gambling now is in my opinion, a slap in the face to them.
I
But
agree. And some will say that they were warring tribes to begin with, and it's just like the tougher side won or whatever. But there's more than meets the eye with this whole, like I just cited the history of there was give and take on both sides,
right,
but there was also leverage, seeing how trusting these tribes were. Also, that they were playing off of the feuds they had with each other. Again, the neutrals seem to be linked up with the Hurons that were north of Lake Ontario, and you cited tobacco. What's that other nation called? The Patoons, or
yep,
so they were all not I wouldn't say confederized, but linked up against the Iroquois. You want to talk about that a little bit, Robbie, and how that relates again to who are the Wenro and the Jesuits? Iroquois Confederacy, that we could track it back to Tadadaho and the Peacemaker story and that podcast. All these links will be in the description below, guys. This history is fascinating,
It is.
but
Yeah.
it's unbelievable. So yeah, they were not only warring each other, and the Iroquois grouped up into the nations of the Seneca, the Cayuga, oh man, the Scoon, right? Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, Mohawk. Boom, I got it.
Nice.
They were grouped up, and then they were going, I wouldn't say against, but just how do you explain that? They were warring with each other, trying to fend off the European influence, but also they weren't confederized with the Wenro, the Hurons. They were separate.
Right. They were all like from the same language family, like both the Huron Confederacy of that time and the Iroquois Confederacy were all of Iroquoian dialect. So they all speak a similar tongue. There might be slight differences in certain words or slang or different things like that. But they all relatively can like understand each other. The oddballs in this region being the Algonquian people that were up along the St. Lawrence too, that were some of the first ones the French and others met as they were coming down the St. Lawrence. And the Algonquian is its own language family. But the Huron, a lot of the Huron nations on the northwest side of like Lake Ontario and stuff, north and northwest of Lake Ontario, were one kind of band of tribes, and then the other side of Lake Ontario, the southeast side of it, would have been Iroquois as we know it, of the five nations of the Iroquois tribe, which now encompass the Tuscarora in modern times. Yeah, they've been allegedly were in turbulent like end fighting due to like kind of retaliation warfare. You attack me, I'll attack you, and it was just end fighting endlessly.
The tribes themselves. That's where the Peacemaker
Yeah.
story comes into play in Iroquois.
And then there's this Peacemaker story, like you referred to, within Iroquois history and legend, or Haudenosaunee. Because funny thing about Iroquois, to give some people some context, is it to go back to the language families, is Iroquois itself is actually an Algonquian word. And that's because they had a fear of the Mohawks, because that's who was kind of up near their area, lower southern banks of the St. Lawrence and stuff like that. You had the top of the Mohawk territory, and they were known to be fierce warriors, some of the most brutal out of the five nations.
Interesting. They were the
And
Eastern Arm, though, so they would have been the first ones encountered. I wonder if that's by utility, because they would have been the Mohawk.
well,
Man,
by the Algonquian peoples. So when the French met the Algonquian peoples, they were like the Iroquois, the Iroquois. Like you gotta watch out for the Iroquois to the
right.
French. When Iroquois like isn't necessarily their name for themselves, it's Haudenosaunee, which means people of the Longhouse.
Can you say that again?
Haudenosaunee.
Haudenosaunee. I had such difficulty trying to pronounce that.
It's hard
until I heard you say it.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Haudenosaunee.
It's a weird one to say, but it's a beautiful word. And Iroquois is an Algonquian word that's actually kind of like a derogatory term, and it means black snake in Algonquian, if I remember correctly, or something like that. So it's just funny that like, I don't know, certain tribes do all this end fighting in other ways in the modern world about, who gets called what and things like that. And, we've just, been naming whole parks and reservations and things after what might be a derogatory term to some people, but nobody seems to recognize it.
That could be in other aspects of life as well, with other terms. As I understand, Christian could have at one point been a derogatory term for those of the way.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, right. And then other words that are deemed derogatory right now jokingly, tongue in cheek, the hard R may have at one time been to delineate someone who was exalted. I don't know, to think in
And
these terms, but it's an interesting way to think about that because everything's inverted.
so
But
so yeah,
when you mentioned that it's a derogatory term, tracking it back to possibly meaning black snake, that made me think immediately of Tadadaho. So, and we're talking about the Iroquois, and we referenced Peacemaker story a couple times. You have the gravy on that. I know it now because I dove into it and listened to a couple podcasts and over. What is the Peacemaker story, Robbie? And how did, like you said, it was revenge warfare in this area amongst these tribes. Something happened that brought the Iroquois together. It has to do with this guy named Tadadaho, one of the coolest, another cool ass old school native name. But
right.
he was an interesting character. And when you say Black Snake, I wonder if that has something to do with it. You want to lay a
And
little gravy on the Peacemaker story? Your buddy's
yeah,
podcast?
and I'll go into that real quick. But to sum up the term thing, the whole black snake thing, yeah, and I could be wrong. If somebody out there knows that better, but I'm pretty sure Iroquois is actually an Algonquian word, and I mean it. I think it means black snake. And the important symbolism, at least to the North American natives, the woodland Northeast natives, is that they associated water with the underworld. To give you some pretext, and the black snake would be a water moccasin, a water snake. Um, so that would have been a very offending thing to say
Okay.
to a native. You know what I mean? You're associating it with like the snake of the underworld, Satan, if you will, the serpent.
Right.
Yeah, be not nice. um, and then the whole Tadadaho thing, those are also like transcendent deal names. I don't know if that's the right term, but like there's still a Tadadaho to this day. The main like leader, there's still a person who's appointed to the term or like position of Tadadaho of the Onondaga tribe to this day. They've done some actual dating of the Iroquois Confederacy through what's known as the Tadadaho stick, which is like his staff. And there's a
Ah,
notch put into it for every Tadadaho.
it's a
And
designation for a title.
yes, nowadays, yes, ever since like there's a Hiawatha for the what was he, Oneida, I think maybe.
Okay.
Or he was he Cayuga? I can't remember what Hiawatha was, what tribe he came from. But all of the tribes still have that kind of iconic figure. And then it's like when you take that position, like almost from a spiritual level, you kind of take on the spirit of Hiawatha or Tadadaho because Tadadaho gets redeemed. You know what I mean? He comes,
He gets
they
redeemed.
come to comb the demons from his hair in the end and stuff like that.
Initially, though, it's like, so we'll get into the Peacemaker story. I would like you to ladle on that briefly, right? Just describe it because Hiawatha is a very important name in that. So is the Peacemaker himself. And then the antagonist is Tadadaho initially. So it's that contrast of the good and the evil right off the jump, right? So you get that polarity. But then Tadadaho does a couple different versions of the story. I like the one where your buddies
But
put in that podcast ascends to a hawk.
right.
But it starts with the one that and again, this podcast, I highly recommend listening to the Peacemaker story of your buddies that you put me on to, Robbie, and their version of it is beautiful. How Hiawatha was sitting on the banks of the water, just reminiscing about how sad he was about losing his family and this revenge warfare that we spoke about in this stuff and what had come of that. Yeah, this is a story that we learned a little bit about in elementary school in this area. We should have learned a lot, way more, but yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, I totally agree. I had never learned it in school. I could see how maybe the Buffalo area might be a little more attuned to native culture, but I had never learned about it in any of the many schools that I attended as a kid. But
Interesting. The school district where I learned it in, It's Tonawanda. Just so there's I mean, obviously a native name, right?
Yeah, that's
Niagara, Tonawanda. That's all. It's all native over here.
yes. So Hiawatha is sitting on the southern banks of Lake Ontario, because, like we said, they would have been Iroquois, as we know it, is southeast banks of uh, Lake Ontario, and he is watching the sunrise over that Lake Ontario, and he actually has a solar eclipse in some renditions of the story happen. So that's kind of cool. They've actually been able to do some dating to relatively pinpoint a general time when they think that solar eclipses happened uh, in this area, Lake Ontario area. They can kind of catalog that. So they've dated one to the 1100s, like the mid 1100s, and then one to like the mid 1400s, I think it was. And then with some other dating they've done with the Tadadaho stick and stuff like that, that also dated if you use kind of statistical data to say like a person keeps a position like this for this X amount of years generally. So with 30 years roughly in this position and like this many hash marks on it, we can date that this stick dates back to, and I think they both
That's
pinpointed
gravy.
1100s or something like that. I think that pinpointed to the 1100s, right around the time that that solar eclipse happened in this area in the 1100s, so
Okay.
the 12th century. And really, just really fascinating. So yeah, so Hiawatha is sitting on the southern banks of Lake Ontario, views this solar eclipse while mourning his wife and his daughters. Um, after his whole village was raided while he was out on a hunting party and his whole family was slaughtered. He came back from hunting to his whole village burned and his family slaughtered, and just grieving for days and just sitting here on the banks thinking about going to get Tadadaho, the enemy leader of the Onondaga. And at this time, he sees something coming across Lake Ontario. And then he realizes it's a man in a boat rowing toward him. And then not only does he realize it's a man in a boat, but it's a Huron man. Because, like I said, the Huron would have been northwest of Iroquois at this point. So he's rowing south across Lake Ontario from the North Shore to the South Shore. And not only that, but he's dressed in white and he's in a white stone boat. There's gravy there. There's some
Yeah.
symbolic gravy there. Um,
He knows.
so so it's at this point that this character is the peacemaker, if you will. And I think it's very interesting that the peacemaker comes in the form of the enemy, ultimately.
Another tribe. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And he starts preaching the great law of peace to Hiawatha. And then essentially gets Hiawatha to calm down and calms his rage to a point to where he isn't blinded by it anymore and he can see that the great law of peace is what needs to happen. We can't keep senselessly doing this end fighting, revenge warfare stuff. So now it's Hiawatha and the peacemakers tasked to go to all the other nations of what we now know as the Iroquois Confederacy, and preach the great law of peace to them and get them on his side, band together. And it's I'll probably butcher it if I try to do the whole story, but
I could fill in.
you probably won't be. But if you are fascinated, I would say, like you said, Dustin will have the link down below. One of my favorite ones is Iroquois History and Legends podcast. I think it's longhousepodcast.com or
That
something
was
like that.
awesome.
And they do a really good rendition of the Peacemaker. Great story. I suggest if it sounds interesting to you, go check it out for sure.
It's probably great.
It probably is great.
It is gravy. My man gets it. And well, so the antagonist is Tadadaho, and their aim is eventually to get back to Tadadaho and make him see the peace that the peacemaker instilled into Hiawatha, and that's their
Right.
plight, right? And off the top of my head, I believe.
And I think it's an ultimate test for Hiawatha too, because we can say that we forgive, but did you really like? It's a true test of will more so than just verbal
Can't just
fluff.
can't just talk about it. You got to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
about it. You got to be about the way, right?
Because
Exactly.
it happened in the story. He's been on this mission. He's already got the Cayuga, the Seneca. He's got all the other ones, and they come to the Onondagas to convert. Hiawatha's or Tadadahos, the last one that they need to get to essentially agree to the Great Law of Peace and sign this doctrine and make this
So
covenant type of a
how
deal. And
how does
when he sees him, he like all of this preaching and change philosophy and stuff that he's been going through completely just strips away, and all his anger comes back, and he charges at him like, "Nah, screw this! I'm taking him out." Like revenge, you know what I mean? But then he like, I forget what happens exactly. Again, go listen to them. I'm just gonna butcher it, trying to do it from memory here, but great story. He ends up yielding. Um, but yeah, just it's epic story.
Tadadaho was the chief elder of the Onondaga, I believe.
Correct.
And I do forget off the top of my head also what Hiawatha was. But again, just a general view. The Scoon is an acronym, SCOON. And M, excuse me, I'm sorry, M like Mary, like Mohawk.
Yes.
Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, Mohawk.
And
Seneca
that's
were the keeper of the western door. The Mohawk were the keeper of the eastern door.
yep, that's moving west to east across the Terra too. Seneca, that's how they go in order.
The
Seneca,
SCOOM, right? The SCOOM name, the acronym SCOOM is moving west
Mohawk.
to
It's
east. Correct.
how their territories are linearly set up
Correct.
across.
So Seneca is the western flank.
Then the
Oh,
Cayuga. Then you have Onondaga, the keepers of the fire, the central fire, because they're in the middle of the five. And then Oneida Mohawk.
now that would establish the Iroquoian Confederacy.
Yeah, it was the end goal of the peacemaking story. Cool creation story too. They're like religious kind of spiritual creation story. How they were made is super fascinating.
Oh, I did a little bit about that. You want to talk about the black snake and stuff like that? That footage that I seen in Lake Michigan. There's something that tells they call their thunder god is Hino, right? And Hino does battle. Hino's kind of like Thor. Hino does battle with the serpent of the Niagara, and I detailed this in my dragon episode. Go check that out, y'all. I do the history of the mythos of dragons and where they real yada yada. But the mythology, just like you said, in this area, they have it too. And their thunder god Hino does battle with the black serpent of the Niagara and the Great Lakes. It's called the Oniare. And heck, man, isn't there footage of this big black eel washing up on a pier on Lake Michigan? I forget the name of the lighthouse, dude. If you don't remember, you've probably seen it.
I think I remember you
It's it
putting
looks
that up.
like it looks like a massive eel. I'm sorry, and it definitely looks like real footage. You can I know in this day and age of AI, but you just wonder. And man, I swam out deep in these lakes, dude. Now that dude, seeing that footage makes you think differently. Anyway, yeah, their god Hino, thunder god Hino, does battle with that serpent, and you wonder where the myth comes from. Did they see this black?
Term, right? That term, black snake, like why they would have been calling people that, you know what I
Right.
mean? Maybe
Yep.
it did relate to a greater, um, gnarlier, nastier beast of the deep than just the black snake, the water snake we know it as.
Right. But then that doesn't take away
But
though from the underworld and how it symbolizes the dragon of the underworld in the water, the primary.
and that would make, yeah, that would even reaffirm that point even harder.
Yep, agree. The primal
So to
water.
get back to this, so these nations would have all been warring with each other, the Iroquois and the Huron. So this site that we were just at, the what I refer to as the Shelby Center settlement, would have been delineated. Well, it's delineated here with the neutral nation, which would have been part of the Huron Confederacy. Like we notated earlier, all part of the same dialect, all still the Iroquoian dialect language family, but not part of these five nations that united under this great law of
So
peace.
the neutral would have been not necessarily in opposition, but a separate from the Iroquois Confederacy. This is where the gravy gets in more.
In their native name too is the Ottawandaron. They didn't call themselves the neutrals. They were allegedly, like you had alluded to earlier, as the black robes moved through this area, the French Jesuits, they gave them the name neutral because they noticed that even though they were loosely allied with the Huron confederacies,
right,
for the most part, they tried to stay out of the Huron Iroquois wars. There was a lot of them, and
they just wanted to capitalize off of them.
They just kind of wanted to do their own thing over here. And I've seen some interesting data from like our that guy Garth we found that did a really cool presentation on him. Like shout out to
Link below.
Ottawandaron from Garth, really good presentation. That they actually weren't as neutral as we think. They were more like enforcers of neutrality. They were pretty brutal in warfare, and like they didn't come at you unless you came at them, from the sounds of it, from his perspective, from his research. But like if you did cross them, like watch out, because they were ruthless.
So
But they were enforcers more so of neutrality than they were like, we don't want to fight, man. Like,
it's interesting that you say that, because this is where it gets into the minutia and the nuance. So you got the neuter neutrals, like Robbie was saying, necessarily weren't, they were, you don't mess with us, we won't mess with you type of deal. But they were linked up with the Wenro, who are in my area, our area, right? And the
right.
Hurons north of Ontario. Though that whole nation is separate from the Iroquois Confederacy, right? Now, why that is, that we're learning about that now, and I'm learning more about it now. It has a lot to do with the European influence a little bit, but these tribes were set up before the European influence came. And what's interesting about how we're pronouncing it now, the Ottawandaron, which is what the neuters were, this whole phonetical thing is fascinating to me. Were they a little bit of bigger stature? And like that dude Garth said, they're quite violent, almost like
Right.
real violent. Okay. And you could say what you will about that. Now, also, were they hooked up with and in cahoots with, you said, Robbie, now this is the Ottawandaron, the neutrals, with the Susquehanna that are south of
Yes.
the Iroquois, like in Erie, PA area?
Yep. They would have been south of the Erie, south of like the Delaware, Iroquois.
Okay, so an interesting attribute, the Susquehanna were known to be a little bit taller stature, possibly. And so
Yes.
allegedly were these Ottawandaron neutrals. What's going on there?
7+ foot, allegedly.
Whoa.
Oh, yeah.
Is that tall tales? And the fish that you caught is 10 inches instead of 7? Or it's like, is there some real meat here? What's going on? And why were they so bloodletting? And then you incorporate this wheel and the Celtic wheel. Well, does this delineate some type of connection, trade route connection to the old world, maybe through Celtic connections, Northern European, maybe? I don't know. These are the type of things that we're getting at here, and we're just
Yeah.
shooting in the dark, but there is some real substance to it.
Right. That's always been one of my hypotheses that I set out to prove throughout um my research in my life is just I think this place has always been a melting pot. Pre-Columbian melting pot too. I think this pot has melted and fused several times in this area into one kind of peoples or whatever, if you will. I think this has all happened kind of before of this, saturation of people in this region, and then kind of not dying back. I don't want to use that term,
Almost like it
but
got left.
fading, or they move off to other greener pastures, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, and then I don't know. I just think it's all happened before,
It's
but
kind of weird how this underwhelming of the pre-Columbian exchange civilizations here is kind of like a parallel thinking. A lot of different niches and old world community research history that we do
right,
is kind of focusing on this right now. And is that why
right.
there's a lot of buried stuff and mudflood Tartaria, whatever? There's
Some
real
cool,
substance here to what we're doing. And again, the field work mixed with the LiDAR research and book work.
yeah.
We got nothing but work ahead of us, Robbie. But this was one of the most fascinating deep dives that I keep on saying that.
Fun thing I learned throughout this is Attawandaron is you know translated as the people whose speech is awry.
That's
Um,
right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
which
What's going on with that?
or I have a definition of it. I had it up somewhere. I don't know where it went.
Try to
But
find it. Don't worry about it, man.
like off or a little different or something like that. So to me, it's kind of saying that the people who talk funny, and then you bring it back to the fact that they're all part of the same dialect, possibly all split from a original tribe at one point. They would have been the people who talked a little funny. Those neutrals over there, those Attawandaron, those guys
They
talk a
talk
little.
funny.
Yeah, it's just
It's
like
like
those Rochesterians, like out here where I am. We talk funny because everything's like A's, like you draw it out. You don't do O's. It's not Rochester. It's Rochester.
yeah. Hey, we get that hard A too a little bit over here. Yeah, hard A. Here's
Yeah.
and then maybe to circle it back home to what I do here in the Western Door, Buffalo. It's like the Wenro is incorporated into this whole thing. Now the Wenro are the tribe that would have been linked up with the neutrals, and as a matter of fact, the Neuter tribe that we went to is within, and I'll have this overlaid on the screen, the Wenro tribe. Now the Wenro is interesting because we only know them, as you put so eloquently, through the black robe Jesuits, right? I would say maybe a part of that. Some of their sect might be cloak and dagger type. That being said, the Jesuits have a big history here in Buffalo. Now, Wenro is the tribe that held the pass. This is very important for me, at least, because Niagara
Mhm.
Falls is the pinch point. When you come in through the front door, which is the St. Lawrence, traditionally getting into the interior of America, which is how the the, the Dutch came in, and then the French and everything.
Right.
That's the front door. But there is possibly another back door, which is up the Hudson in the New York Harbor, which is what I've been hitting on a little bit. But what's going on with the Wenro, and this is I'm going to sink in here in Buffalo, because I think that there were possibly some megalithic earthworks here, and it's just interesting that we don't know much about the Wenro.
Right.
And the little that we do know of this tribe, who were linked up with the Neuters, not necessarily directly in combat with the Iroquois, but certainly not friendly. Okay. Why do we only know about the Wenro, who held this important pass through the Jesuits? It's very interesting.
Right.
I couldn't find a lot of information about the Wenro tribe. There were, that dude Garth talked about it. Again, this link will be below, and how this kind of was may have been an empire. Track us back to caissons, and there's more I got to do in this book. It's just interesting. One of the French dudes that came through here was named Caisson or whatever, and he was a tall guy.
Mm.
Caisson monolithic bridge
Yeah.
piers in the International Bridge. So what was going on? I would actually ask the viewers, anyone who knows more about the Wenro tribe or information regarding it, share it, please.
Yeah. And on that note of like your pursuit for the proof of there being an earthwork or fortification in the Buffalo Black Rock area. When me and you both noted this when we were going through both Rise and Fall of the Attawandaron done by Garth, and a couple other presentations that we sleuthed to find more on the neutrals, because they're even the Attawandaron are really hard to find data on. There's more than there is for the Wenro, which were their neighbors here, just on the other side of the Niagara River. But we
Exactly.
both noted there was like a subtle little tidbit, but that the Attawandaron are mostly noted to be up in what is like southeastern Ontario, like or southwestern Ontario, excuse me, and like the Hamilton area. So the other side of Niagara River from you.
Yep.
And um, so they're more noted, like their main area was up there, but they did know a fortification and another settlement near the Buffalo area, which I thought was gravy. And like you said, so Buffalo, this fortification that you've been searching for, that kind of just gave us more tidbits of where to look and who to look at when you're looking of possible references and points of interest.
Definitely. I knew it was going to track back to the natives. And again, I'm going to have to solicit the help of our friend Mason Winfield. Our conversation dealt a little bit with this, but I'm gonna have to track back with him because I know that he's got some native gravy also. But yeah, it's like the Wenro tribe held the whole Niagara River region effectively, and they were we would put in
Neutral,
cahoots
yeah.
with the Neuters, the Hurons, and the Petun.
But then
Oh,
this wide dance that we see between the Genesee River, Rochester over here, and Buffalo, Niagara River, over here, this would have all been Wenro territory
exactly.
because it would have been before the Seneca moved west over the Genesee River into that middle ground between those two rivers. And then, like we said, the majority of neutral control and territory would have been over here west of the Niagara. So, like we said, they may have had a large settlement just across the river where they could still hold it and control it, but the majority of that middle ground would have been Wenro territory, and we know little to nothing besides the name of those
And it's
people.
and exactly now here you might say why. Well, what's the significance of that? Because the significance of the Niagara River and the pinch point of coming into the interior, you have to be able to negotiate and portage the Niagara Falls, or you got to know the people there. So the Wenro held a very important pass for quite a long time. And the fact that we don't really know anything about them only but through the Jesuits, there's reason to question this at face value. I mean, the Niagara Escarpment and where the Niagara Falls meet Lake Ontario or the lower Niagara, you have to be able to, if you control that pinch point, you have effectively all the commerce locked down in and out of the so-called New World. But that's why I try to link up that connection between the neutrals and the Susquehanna, because the Susquehanna would have been under the Iroquois, and if you can come up through like I've speculated before, if you can come up through the Hudson and get around kind of like a back door around Niagara Falls, you'd have to be in good with the Susquehanna. And the Susquehanna were in good with the neutrals. So there's something going on there. I think that there was a back door, and was it established by the Vikings? Maybe is that something to look into? I mean, that's my heritage. Of course, I'm going to be partial to that, but there is some real meat here. Because again, I'll cite Norwegian historians saying that Vikings were down in probably Florida and Mexico. It doesn't make sense for us to stop at South Nova Scotia, where they say. But I've posited the notion maybe New York State is the settlement of Vinland that Leif Erikson was citing. They really don't know where it is, but maybe we got wineries all over the place. So this is where it tracks back and hits home, Robbie, and we can ping 100 more sites, dude, and hit them for the next couple of years. So this
Yeah.
was one of the funnest ones that I've done yet with you, man. And then it just it expands into so much more stuff. It's like, oh, now we got to learn about anything I do. I feel like I got to learn about it up, down, left, and right so I can explain it with context, and the fact that
Yeah.
this is our home area.
In the majority of my research, why I see this site, even though it's in kind of the heart of the middle ground there between those two lakes. And one thing to note why I would say this is a very important territory, and the Wenro would have been a very important tribe to understand. And why I wish we knew more about them. Not only because, like you said, it's the portage area to traverse into the inner territory. You know what I mean? That
The fur
it,
pelt trade.
but also, if you look at where we are, like Garth cited for the Hamilton area, um, it's arguably the Fertile Crescent of the New World too. You have a pinch point where you have a lake draining, and you have all these bodies of water draining to a lake, and then it's a drainage basin for the lake if the lake is too full. We're right in the Lake Ontario basin, or at least I am right where I am, like in the heart of Western New York here.
What was the
Um,
name of that forest that he called in Southern Ontario? Again, shout out to our Canadian counterparts across the river, but like a Carolinian forest.
In forest. Yeah, we have a weird microclimate in this area because of all the bodies of water, especially on the other side of uh Niagara River there where he's citing the Hamilton, Ontario kind of area, where you have Lake Erie below you, Lake Ontario to the east of you, and you have, Lake Michigan and Huron and stuff that are kind of above to the west of you. It's just you're like surrounded by thermal batteries, if you will.
It's a confluence. This area is a confluence of, I've said this before, even adjacent to the native research. It's a confluence of air, earth, and water energies, I believe. And like to track it back to the Terra and the three sisters of the corn squash, the natives knew this, right? And not only the Terra flora of the squash, the corn, and the beans, fish were a huge uh, sustaining protein for these natives. And I'm a
Right.
fisherman. You fish, right? Not just hiking. We fish.
Yeah. Fishing. Yep.
This is
I
a
like
very fruitful area. It's not lost on us here now.
it.
It's not. It wasn't lost on the natives 500, 600, 7 years, 100 years ago. So
Fertile ground in the whole world.
there's an essence to this area, and this is what we're digging up here. I appreciate you guys all being with us, Robbie. I think that we laid out some gravy on the data aspect of our field work, bro. What do you think?
Yeah.
Thank you again.
I'd like to say too, on that Three Sisters note, if people are interested more in that, there's so much more in depth you could go into that, because the Three Sisters are like the main support system, but it goes so much deeper. There's actually, like, if you look into it, a lot of tribes recognize the fourth sister of sunflower, and a lot of old native symbolism or storytelling and stuff like that. You'll see artist renditions of like the Three Sisters, to where like everything's actually growing like out of the body of the humans, the
Yeah, I've
sisters.
seen that. I shared it on the. I shared one of those where that.
Like you'll get other anecdotal things like and it's kind of tidbits like metaphors or something, or allegories on where to plant too. Like you'll see like purple potatoes grew from her toes or something like that, telling you essentially to like plant potatoes at the base of the mound, and this grew from her head. Okay, that goes on the top of the mound, because they grew their gardens in little mound gardens. They would have been little like rounded mounds. So on that note, if people are more interested in that, look up more on the Three Sisters Longhouse podcast that I referred to earlier. Does some really good Three Sisters episodes. And also check out my YouTube channel, my shorts. We're getting ready to start planting Three Sisters garden here.
What's the name of your YouTube channel?
It's just Robbie Rad. So
Robbie Rad, ROBBIERAD. The dude's a
yep.
legend. Now to round this out, we just detailed our field work at the Neuter Fort. We detailed the general history of the Iroquois and how they play with the tribes around here, and the Wenro and the Neutrals and their earlier names, and how the Iroquois is a general language that was spoken in this area. The nuance is more about the Iroquois Confederacy, the peacemaker story. And this was just I guess you'd say a beginning for this aspect of our research, Rob, because we got so much more to do. So yeah, what was going on with the Wenro? Does it have something to do with the connection between the neutrals? What was their name? Arawandron?
Wanderon, yep.
If you had a wander on connection with the Susquehanna, what's going on there? These bigger native tribes. Oh, you're good, Robbie. These bigger native tribes, which is the neutrals, as we know, and the Susquehanna, which were south of the Iroquois. It just comes to my mind, was there a connection there with these bigger guys and the Celtic cross that Robbie detailed earlier, how it looks like this Neuter fort that we were at? There's more than meets the eye here, and we're going to be getting into it a lot more. So again, thanks for showing up. Robbie, you knocked this one out of the park again, and we got so much more work to do, tracking it back to old works in Buffalo and Western Door area. So make sure to subscribe at Robbie Rad. Let's get him over 1,000.
Appreciate that, dude. Yeah, always a pleasure to be here. And yeah.
How many more Aboriginal sites do we have or the bounds of that link that you have? There's hundreds, bro. We have for years.
It's broke up on counties. I'd like to find as many of them as I can, and then also just try to do some correlating of the ones that are gone. You know, for instance, there's one in Monroe County that was a two mounds next to each other, rather small ones, but still pretty cool. And they now sit where Seabreeze Amusement Park is in Irondequoit, just north.
I was gonna say a golf course maybe or something like.
Yeah. So some of them are just lost to time and have been terraformed, you know.
Well, that's what we're here for, because we'll get out to it and we'll showcase it and show it and share it, and then detail the history that we've and the research that we've done behind the scenes. So that was another episode of Bushwhacking History in Buffalo with Berserker Bear and Robbie Red. Again, go check out his YouTube channel. All the links that we cited will be below in the description, as well as his channel. So subscribe to him, get him over 1K. Look, he's got a beautiful family. There you go.
Brother.
All right, man.
Appreciate it.
Check you later.
Later.